Okay, this is class 5, and today we are working with pen and ink and watercolor. And so before I do the demo, I just wanted to talk a little bit about ways of using pen and ink with watercolor. This was a painting that I did of Manhattan Beach with I start with, some people like to paint first and add pen and ink later. I like to do the pen and ink and then I add the watercolor to it. And it's really important to make sure that the pens you use are waterproof. And so either direction you go, you want to be able to, you want to make sure that you can go back in without disturbing the ink, but only working with the watercolor. So this is one way. To me, it's easier to do the pen and ink first, because then I start with pencil and then I just add the pen and ink. But I like to make the pen and ink very loose, and so then I just have a template for what I'm painting, so I can just add the color and the layers. So this one was done out on the beach, and so it is very loose, and I used pan paints, not tube paints, for this, and I used a micron pen. These are wonderful. This is a 2. I probably use like an 005 or a 1 for this because of the fine lines. So, but Micron makes some wonderful pens that have various tips on them. They're really wonderful to have in your watercolor kit. So this was another one I did, and of a house. I was staying at my daughter's, and this was a house across the street. And so I used to do a lot of these architectural watercolors, and I love using kind of a very loose, messy pen and ink with them. I think it adds a lot of energy, and if I wanted super straight lines, I could have done that, but I find this to be much more satisfying to me. And then I can just fill in with a color, and it's a very fun, and it's a much faster way of painting. You're painting very loose and free. A lot of you know that I paint handmade cards, and these are some of the ones that I've done using this pen and ink and watercolor technique. And these two, I used a brown ink, which this is the ink I'm going to use today. It's a Daler-Rowney FW acrylic ink, and this is a sepia color. I also do use a black and white ink, and for these I use a crow quill pen, which is like this it's a short little tip that fits into a holder, and it just gives you a lot of variety of lines that you can make with this pen, and that's what I'll be using today. I find this it's a very freeing, very loose kind of painting that does not require a lot of detail. I'm still using value to give some dimension to these things, but it's a much looser way to create than the kind of painting that we've been doing. So I've got it transferred. Now I'm going to add some of these tendril lines that I want, so I don't forget them when I get ready to get my pen and ink out. I'm using this De La Moroni FW sepia ink, and it's an acrylic ink, and it works very well for pen and ink. Then I have a crow quill tip in this other holder, because my crow quill holder has decided that it doesn't want to give up the other one, which is about worn out. So, but this works fine, and it's a nice long handle, so it's easy for drawing. So I always have a paper towel over. Let's see. I set my ink on a paper towel, so it doesn't make a huge mess. And the lid always goes on a paper towel, because otherwise it drips everywhere and gets ink everywhere. Then I have another paper towel that I wet, so that if I have to take a quick break, or if my pen gets too full of ink, I can clean it out like that quickly and keep the ink from drying on there. Okay, so now I'm just going to dip, and I'm just going to start drawing, and try not to get too much water on the paper. And the reason I love this style of ink, of drawing with a pen, rather than a micron pen, is because of the variation of line that I get with this. I push it down, and I get a wider line. And then the thing is, you don't want to work in multiple directions with your pen. The tip does not like that. So it's better to figure out how you can make everything go in mostly the same direction. Sometimes you do have to go another way, simply because your hand doesn't work the other way on a certain line. So this is such an interesting petal here. I'm not following my pencil totally because I'm seeing that I want things to be a little different than what I had there. These flowers are just very loose and whimsical. And so you want to use a lot of curved lines and just kind of let them flow around the page. What to do over here. It's always good to start, if you're right-handed, start from the left and work to the right, which I didn't do here. So make sure that you don't put your hand in wet ink. Looks like I did, but some of that got a little water drop there. One of the things you can do is you want to add some value while you're doing ink. Some things are more amenable to that than others. Flowers not so much because they're so soft, but you can do some cross hatching, some line work in there. We could do this whole thing could be done in ink without any paint. It could also be a beautiful piece of art that way. So, okay, so I'm done with my pen. So I'm getting it all cleaned out. Make sure, but I'm not going to put it away because I may change after the thing is done. I may decide to add some more ink. So, and now it just needs to dry for a few minutes. And I can start getting my paints ready and my brushes ready. I'm going to use the pinks, and I'm going to start with the quinacridone paint like I did in the painting. So I'm gonna go in and do a little bit of erasing pencil lines that I don't want to be left behind. Okay, so this is all dry and ready. And this is a number 4 brush, which I think is about the right size for this. Could use a 6. I'll try a 6. Okay, so I'm going to wet the petal. And this time I'm going to start from the base. You know me and my paper towels. I don't know anybody who uses as many paper towels as I do, but it's my favorite brush. Okay, so now for my leaves, I'm going to do a number 4. Number 4, and then for the tendrils, actually I'm going to do a number 3, I think. And then I can do the leaves and the tendrils in that. And notice, I mean, these lines, all I'm going to do here is to kind of follow that line along just to give it some color. This is a much looser style, much faster. See, I neglected to extend this stem all the way down, so I will have to go back over that with some ink when this is all dry. This is rose, quinacridone rose. I'm putting some paint on, and then I'm wetting my brush, getting more water on my brush so I can pull the paint where I want it to go. Rather than following these flowers completely, one of the things that you want to do is you want to create areas of light that are surrounded by dark, because that makes them pop. So like this little hood on this, there's going to be shadow inside of here, but this part can be light up here, and then the petal behind it can also be dark, because then that makes that the hood of that bloom stand out a little more. So you are the master of your composition. So decide how you want the colors to, you want the values to support what you're highlighting. I mean, you could basically, you could leave it just like that. You wouldn't have to add any more color. If you didn't want, you could leave it sort of unfinished that way. But I just have to push it and see how far it'll go. Accent these little ripple areas. You can add some shadow value to those. That makes your eye go down into that little dip. This little white center, little white area, the lighter area underneath would cast a shadow on this petal. And then this part would cast a shadow on the little center. The underside of this stem would be in shadow. And the shadow would probably switch sides so that once it gets down past this area, it's going to be a little lighter. Under here, it's going to be dark because this petal is shading it. And the same with underneath this leaf here. See, by using different, a little bit different way that you use your value, you give these things, these lines, sort of, it makes them pop a little bit. It tends to, because what causes people to see things pop off the page has to do with value. It's all about value. It's all about trying to mimic the way light is affected by the different things that are going on, the different parts of the painting. So wherever you go, wherever you are, notice how light affects different surfaces, how different times of day the light will affect a surface. The same surface can look very different at different times of the day. And just catalog all of that information in your brain that you can use so that when you're painting, you don't have to depend on photos, which are totally undependable because the camera just doesn't capture 3D. It really just distorts it in various ways. And your eye, when you're looking at a photograph, you don't always see that because your brain says, okay, your brain does that shorthand thing where it just says, oh, okay, that I know what that is, and that's the way it's supposed to be. And so if you're trying to completely copy a photograph, that distortion is going to get transferred to your artwork. And it's important to add your own real life experience to what you're painting. Okay, so I'm just going to add a little bit of magenta to spots that I think that I want to highlight a little bit more. Kind of it deepens some of these shadow areas. Kind of brings them back to a pink. So I think I'm done with this. If I were to want to put a background on it, I would do a very loose sky blue, just, a wet on wet technique. But I don't think I want to do that right now. I don't think it needs it. Thanks for watching this tutorial on pen and ink and watercolor, and enjoy your day. Thanks for watching.